Good evening and welcome to Keep Indiana Learning's YouTube channel and coming to you live on a variety of other social media platforms. I am Marty Hoofer, the Keep Indiana Learning Digital Content Manager, and I am so excited about what is about to happen tonight. We are kicking off a year-long series for early childhood educators. When I came to Keep Indiana Learning just over a year ago, that stood out to me as a gap we had. Those are important educators that we weren't reaching. And so through a series of connections, I've met Angielena and Kristin, and I am so excited to have them tonight and to kick off this year-long series of focused and intentional professional development for our early childhood educators. So, Angielena, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself tonight?
Sure. As she stated, my name is Angielena Williams. I have been in the field for over 25 years now in a variety of positions, and I currently am a senior project manager of early care and learning in the Office of Early Childhood Education and Out of School Learning under the Family and Social Services Administration.
Awesome. All right, Kristin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hi there. My name is Kristin, and I am currently the director of Clark Pleasant Early Learning Center, which is down in the Greenwood, Whiteland, New Whiteland area. This is my 28th year in education. I've spent most of those years as an elementary teacher, special education teacher, or administrator, and now have been down at Clark Pleasant working with our early learning center for about a year and a half now.
So we are in good hands. We have decades of experience at a variety of levels. And I think it's important to bring that elementary perspective because you get to see what's kind of that next step. I think it's important to connect it all together. So I love the experience that you guys bring to the table. So what we're going to do tonight, we have some questions. I'm just going to throw them out there. And if one of you wants to jump in, great. Otherwise, I'll just pick on one of you and we'll just talk about some early childhood topics. So the first one, every educator can relate to. It doesn't even matter what age they teach. There are so many standards in this case for early childhood learners here in Indiana. How do you make sure you're able to teach them all? I feel like I'm setting you up to fail with that question, but how do you decide what to teach? Either one of you want to tackle that one?
Do you care if I jump in, Angielena? Okay.
Go ahead, Kristin.
So those early learning foundations are mammoth for us, just as the elementary, middle, and high school standards are for Indiana. And so at Clark Pleasant Early Learning Center, we have identified essential standards through our PLC work. So I really don't think that you can say that you're going to be able to get every child to master every single standard. I think that children need to be exposed to them all. But then we went to our kindergarten teachers and we said, what are the most critical skills that your incoming kindergartners need to have in order for them to be successful in those beginning weeks and months of kindergarten? They identified which standards or which foundations they would hope that their children had. And so we then took that list and we compared it to the skills, knowledge, and behaviors, or the SKBs, that are evaluated and assessed through iSprout. And we mapped those together. We linked them together so that we focus on those essential standards through the SKBs and iSprout. So we introduce them, we expose kids to all of them, but we understand that mastery is going to come for those essential ones. And we work pretty hard on that. And we're very I've just kind of lost the word there. But we're intentional about it. So as we have planned our units and our curriculum, we're not waiting till the end of the year to see, which ones did we not get to? We've got those mapped out, and we have a pacing guide to help us to make sure that we are right on target to hit all of those essential standards.
Angielena, you want to add anything to that? Your thoughts?
So just, Kristin covered that very well, especially specific to their environment. And so I would just share that for those that are new to what early learning foundations are, they are like the academic standards for children that are birthed through age 5. And so those can be found on the DOE's website. And they are currently going under revision, just so that everyone knows that. And they are standing up an Office of Kindergarten Readiness. And as soon as those folks get a chance to look at those, hopefully they will be published soon. And so.
Wow. Standards starting at birth.
Yes, ma'am.
Wow. I had no idea. No idea. And I guess I'd also just never thought about curriculum mapping and a scope and sequence, for a 3-year-old's class. But I understand that as a middle school teacher, but it does make perfect sense. It doesn't really matter the age of the learner or the skill. You still need a plan, and you have to know how to attack it. Yeah. So kind of along those lines, this next question, there are several curriculum models that can be implemented in an early childhood classroom. How would you encourage a teaching team to choose a model? That's a great question, because there's so many ways that you can teach things. Angielena, what are your thoughts on how do you go about choosing how to teach things?
Sure. So I think that doing research is key, especially for those that may not have started in the early childhood field, is to just look up early childhood curriculum models. And so there are a variety of models that talk about the environment as the third teacher. There are some that focus a lot on the individual child themselves versus a focus on social interaction. There are some that are project-based. And so, there are some that come to mind, like the Reggio Emilia approach, which comes out of Italy. You have Waldorf, you have Bank Street, you have High Scope, you also have Montessori. And so, sitting together as a team and looking those up, and then deciding if you have had that background in early childhood education, just thinking about some of those early childhood theorists and their theories, the way that children best learn. And so a couple of my favorites are Albert Bandura. He focused on the social learning theory. And then I also like Lev Vygotsky, who did the social cultural learning theory. And so, looking deep into those and then structuring your classroom based off of how they shared that they felt children best learn is what I would say to do.
I have a follow-up question, but I'm going to see what Kristin says first, and then I'll figure out how to ask my question. Go for it, Kristin.
So we use Connect for Learning. That is our purchased research-based curriculum at Clark Pleasant. And it was really interesting because when I first came to my position, I really felt like our teachers were struggling a little bit because we have some classrooms that are full day for 4-year-old children. We have some classrooms that are half days for 4-year-old children. And then we have some classes that are half days for 3-year-olds. Yet Connect for Learning, our curriculum is written for full day 4-year-olds 5 days a week. And we are also 4 days a week. So we're trying to figure out how you take all of this great information and this great resource and kind of scaffold it for each program and each classroom. So I really think that teachers need to understand, no matter what purchased curriculum you are given or you find yourself inheriting, The important thing is to go back to those early learning foundations and know that that's your Bible. That's what you are supposed to make sure that all of your children are learning throughout the school year. And then you can take your curriculum and you can help teach the standards and the foundations by using this curriculum. So I think it's also really important that that you look to see how your curriculum is aligned to our foundations. So that's one thing that we have gone through. We've kind of scrubbed through each unit to see, are there foundations or SKBs that are not hit very well in our curriculum? That's where we have to kind of go back and backfill a bit. And then sometimes we spent a little bit of time at the beginning of this school year coming up with some additional activities to do for our youngest children, because most curriculums were not written for children who were coming out of a pandemic. And we're really seeing in our with our youngest learners that their language skills are they're low right now. Those expressive language skills really took a hit because of just being in isolation or not being exposed to the amount of things that my children or your children might have been exposed to. So we isolated some skills and said, okay, we're going to need to just take a pause on our curriculum for a moment and really build those skills within our classrooms and our lessons, because we felt like they were some of the very foundational skills that our children needed before we could go on to a unit in a week and a more structured activity.
Okay, which makes perfect sense. And I think that's what all educators have had to do is like, okay, wait a minute. We need to fill in a few gaps before we can take more steps forward. And, it's not very often you live through a pandemic and have to figure out how to go forward.
Right.
Thank goodness.
Right.
So, Angielena, the follow-up question then I have for you, because I think I know what Kristin's answer would be to this, or at least what her center does, I think would be her answer. You were talking about different models. Could in one building, you have one teacher doing one model and one teacher doing another? Obviously, in Kristin's building, I don't think that would happen because they're using but could that work, or would that just be a disaster? Do these curriculums play, or these approaches play nicely together?
So that's a really great question, and it really does depend on the direction that facility takes and chooses to take as it relates to curriculum. As it was shared, as Kristin shared, there are some facilities that do they purchase a prescribed curriculum. So it lays out, everything for them, and they can marry that with the early learning foundations. And that way it makes it a lot easier to plan for, getting together and kind of going over some of the glows and the grows of the curriculum with all of the teachers. But then there are some facilities that do allow for the teachers to have that autonomy and base their curriculum off of what they've learned in school, the different curriculum models that I've talked about. And so sometimes it's what works best for those teachers, especially as long as they are following those early learning foundations. And as Kristin pointed out, is making sure that the children are getting what they need, especially to be successful moving forward. And especially when they get into those ages, that 4 and that 5-year-old, preparing them for that kindergarten. So matching them together, all of the curriculum models work well with the early learning foundations. And so it's just a matter of those teachers being very intentional and having a familiarity with the early learning foundations and knowing how to pair that. And then, of course, it's all about individualizing the care to each child based off of their needs. And so I'm doing some observation and assessment, which a lot of the curriculums come with an assessment tool, and some do not. And so that's something else to look at when you're looking at a curriculum overall, is the observation and the assessment that goes along with that.
Okay. So I want to come back to that idea of assessment, but so So what I'm learning from today, is that, I'm sorry, someone in my house is making noise. What I'm learning is that the foundations are critical. Bottom line, so foundations is a great name for this. That this is what drives all of it. So that's my big takeaway, are the early childhood foundations. But
Yes,
my
ma'am.
next, probably my last question. You mentioned, Angielena, assessment. So when you're developing your curriculum or using a purchased curriculum that includes planning for those activities and observations and assessment, what are some strategies that you use when developing or analyzing a curriculum? That's a loaded question. But how do you? I'm giving you like 2 minutes to talk about something that could take you.
Right.
I'm sorry. But so
No.
one of you wants to tackle that first. How do you go about picking and choosing what's best?
So, Kristen, do you want to start with this one and I can follow up?
Yeah. So a couple of things came to mind, Marty, as you were asking that question. First of all, I want to put in 2 quick plugs. I did a Keep Indiana Learning presentation in the spring on using iSprout, which is the Indiana State Assessment for students. It originally was geared towards children who have IEPs and access special education services, but you can use it in your center or your school for all children, and it's free of charge. So that's something that we started last school year. So I'd love if if our viewers have any questions or ideas about using iSprout or need help, I'd love for them to be able to go back to the Keep Indiana Learning website and find that presentation, and then reach out if you've got any questions. And then in October, I believe it's October 19th, we're going to be doing a session on curriculum mapping. So that's when we'll really get into the meat of how we are doing that as a staff at my school. And not that we have it all figured out by any means, but it's right now is something that we are super proud of, this work that we're doing. So to get kind of back to your question, Marty, last year when we were picking the essential SKBs, or those essential skills, I feel like we did it in a very hurried method where we just were like, okay, who votes for this one? Raise your hand if and it was everything that then when we read a book about the PLC process in an early childhood setting, they said, don't do it like that. That's exactly how we did it. So this school year, we kind of laughed when we read that part. So this school year, we really took time, like I said, going and talking to other teachers. I am a part of our elementary principal PLC, which allows me to have great conversations with district leaders and the other administrators in my school district. So I am well aware of what they need for our children to leave with and to enter kindergarten. And then we really map out what our children need. So again, it might look different. And like Angielena was saying, how teachers need to have that autonomy. So when we are doing our curriculum work, our teachers share out what is coming up in the next week. And then they break out into their teaching teams. And so I had 2 teachers, and when they're in that smaller meeting, they're identifying which specific lessons and assessments they'll be doing that week. So I had 2 teachers come to me and say, we feel like we are overloading our children. We're planning too much, and we would like to know if it's okay with you if we stretch out the different activities that we've selected for this week. So instead of doing this focus or this connect lesson in one day, what if we stretched it out and do it over 2 days? And absolutely, you have to be responsive to what your children need at the time that you're teaching and at the time that they need it. Or frankly, it doesn't really matter what we're teaching. If they're not ready to receive it, and they are overwhelmed, or something is going on where a child isn't able to receive the instruction, we have to stop and address that. So I think that's kind of my biggest answer to your question, is that responsivity that a teacher has to have. And then just knowing, you do what your kids need. And we talk a lot too about having that guaranteed and viable curriculum. So it can't be this teacher lottery that parents hope that their child gets that teacher that they know will teach them the foundations. Everybody needs to be on that same page, but then how we do it can be different depending on what our children need.
Love that. Angielena, strategies.
What are yes. So for me, just understanding that and having had those teachers that, we were all working on, we use teaching strategies. And so being able to observe and set up different environments based off of, the foundations and what you're going to cover with the children, going through that curriculum mapping, because teaching strategies does a great job of having those things. Either you can have it either where they are prepared or not. But to me, the strongest piece of assessment is observation and planning. And so when you're planning your activities based off of the early learning foundations, and you're observing, going through and documenting what the children are saying, how they're responding, whether or not they're able to get through those activities either in a free center or in a small group, or when you pull them over individually, knowing what they can and cannot handle allows you to be able to assess how you're planning your activities and maybe make some adjustments. And so one of the biggest things that I like to teach my students is that you have to create that environment for and take into consideration that you have a diverse set of learners. So you may have children that have special needs, but you may also have children that are English language.
Are we?
Oh, no.
Are you back? You were frozen for just a little bit.
Oh, no, yeah.
So we lost you at English language learners.
Yes, so you may have English language learners, or you may also have children that are gifted and exceptional. And so I like to make sure that people understand that that observation piece and individualizing and using what you have observed to then move forward with your planning, whether every teacher in the building is using the same thing, or whether the teachers have that autonomy to create their lessons and do what they need, because if they will have a director or someone who is there to guide them and coach them and mentor them to make sure that they are following along what they need to, so that the children are all successful. You know what I mean? And so the biggest piece for me with assessment is making sure that the observations are taking place and that the teachers are very intentional about the activities that they're planning so that they meet the children's individual needs. And so that's what I wanted to add to that. Yeah.
Love it. Ladies, I have learned so much from you tonight. And this is just we've been talking 23 minutes. And so I know your sessions where you get to dive in and go deep for an hour on specific topics are going to be so helpful to folks that watch those. So Angielena, I know our first session is next Wednesday night at 6:30. Not here on social media, but it's through Keep Indiana Learning, our engagement center. So that's where you can sign up. But you want to tell us a little bit about what's going to happen next week?
Sure. Yes, ma'am. And so the title of the session that I'm going to be facilitating is called Demystifying Curriculum for Home-Based Providers. And I'd like to share that came from a very dear friend of mine who is currently a home-based provider that has actually is getting ready to go larger. And so would like to give the credit to her that we are going to be brainstorming together, hopefully to put together a very great presentation for those that are in the field, but that they work out of their homes as a family home care provider for children birth to age 5. And so I really think that you'll get a lot out of this session, and hope that I will see you there so that we can take away some of those myths and some of the angst that you may have about trying to develop a curriculum in that type of environment.
Yes. Thank you. That'll be a great resource. So it's there, it's scrolling there at the bottom, the address for the Engagement Center. And so we'll be live next Wednesday night at 6:30, 6:30 to 7:30. But if you can't catch it live next Wednesday night, go ahead and sign up, because then you get an email that reminds you, hey, here's the link, and you can go back out and watch it later. So those Engagement Center events are awesome for that.
Yeah. You know, if I can just jump in, I got to tell you guys, if you are watching this and thinking, oh, I'm not sure, you will learn, even if you don't have an in-home center, join Angielena, watch it, sign up, watch it later if you can't be live with her. Every time I watch one of her presentations, I learn from her. So don't worry if the exact title doesn't fit. It will be time well spent with her, I promise.
Yes, as evidence tonight, time with you two is always time well spent. So ladies, thank you so much. I am so excited. We'll do another live stream like this in January to kick off our second semester, but we have our fall lineup all set, so you can find that on the Keep Indiana Learning homepage. In our Engagement Center, there's an entire early childhood section, and so you can find it under live events or find it in the early childhood section. I try to make things easy to find because I want to be where people are and be easy for them to sign up. So ladies, thank you so much for your time. Thank you in advance for your time coming up later this fall. And we will see you soon.
Sounds great.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, viewers. Have a great evening.